Welcome to you both. General Nash, is General Petraeus the right man for this incredibly tough job?
Oh, I don't think we, on paper anyway, could come up with anybody any better. He's well qualified in terms of experience and education, both in terms of operations in Iraq and the opportunity he's had in the last 16 months to think through all the issues, especially evolving around the writing of this manual that so many people have talked about.
Can't think of anyone better?
Well, General Petraeus is the latest in a series of officers selected by the retired four-stars and presented to the administration as the ideal candidate. A couple of years ago, Senator McCain made the statement that Generals Sanchez and Abizaid were probably the two best generals we've ever had. I don't think Senator McCain would make that assertion today. They've presided over a disaster. General Casey is now left, and Senator McCain is actually talking about blocking his nomination to be Chief of Staff of the Army. This leaves us with General Petraeus. What do we know about him? Well, I would say he comes to this job with 3 strikes against him. And let's set the effusive praise aside that we've heard before with General Abizaid. Number 1, he commanded the 101st Air Mobile Division on the way to Baghdad. It was a singularly undistinguished command. His assistant division commander at the end of the operation was so disappointed in the failure of the 101st to contribute much to the outcome that he said the 5th Corps had fought the war essentially with one hand tied behind its back. The 3rd Infantry Division had carried the fight. Secondly, he goes to Mosul, and he worked very hard to demonstrate his sensitivity to the cultural differences, to work on a whole range of issues. But we also know that some people would say within hours of the 101st departure, the area reverted to insurgent control. Actually speaking, the insurgents simply took it over. And then finally, you have the training of the Iraqi army. The Iraqi army today is, by anyone's definition, a disaster, and it is substantially his creation.
That's quite a litany. That sounds like a litany of failure. How do you see his experience in Iraq?
Well, I think if we just take them in order, the fighting of the war, if you look at the operations of the 101st Airborne Division, it complied with the orders it was given, and the Corps fought the battle. His bosses fought the battle they wanted to fight. And I know they were somewhat frustrated, the 101st that is, that they didn't get into more of a scrap. But I don't think you lay that on General Petraeus. That's other folks that need to account for the operations that took place in the war. My view of Mosul is considerably different. When General Petraeus was up there, and I visited with him in September of 2003 and saw his operations, I thought they were very mindful of many of the things that he has since written in the manual. He was working the politics, he was working the economics, and he was working it without a lot of help from above, because he had his piece of territory and he was doing his thing, and I think he was extremely successful. There's no doubt that as he departed, the insurgency, which was growing in the south, moved north, and his 20,000-man division was replaced by a brigade-sized organization of about 6,000 to 7,000 folks. So a considerable change in American strength. And I would attribute that, and it certainly didn't happen the next morning after he left. The charges about the training of the Iraqi army are of deep concern. But to lay that on the shoulders of one man, I think would be to not understand much larger issues, a lack of resourcing from the United States government, and a lack of a political environment or the conditions within Iraq that would allow a soldier to build an army. He shares in the difficulties there, but then again, it has been 16 months since he left.
Let's look at Mosul more deeply here, because there he had his men going into the neighborhoods, did he not? Trying to use less force, more persuasion. He had, as I understand it, little precinct bases, much like, it sounds like what they're hoping to do in Baghdad. One, do you think, at least that I take your point that after it ended, Colonel Macgregor, it didn't last, but do you think that the strategy and approach itself worked, and can it be applied in Baghdad?
No. First of all, in Mosul, when he arrived with the 101st, there was no insurgency. That area was fairly pacific. I spoke with some soldiers in the 101st who'd been on patrol, and they talked about patrolling there for over 30 days without any incident until finally they were approached, and someone at a marketplace walked up and in perfect English said, "Do you see a problem here?" And they said, "No." And they said, "Well, then why are you here?" The next day they had their first RPG attack on the patrol. Soldiers said, we were not attacked, we did not patrol because we were attacked because we patrolled.
Take that to Baghdad now.
Well, if you go to Baghdad, and now you have an absolutely hardened population against you. We are hated in that country. The Sunni Muslim population has good reason to hate us based upon how we've treated them over the last couple of years. But the Shiite population has joined that particular throng. We have no friends, if you will. Sending men with rifles in small numbers to go into these neighborhoods, to stay in these neighborhoods, is a very, very dangerous thing to do in my estimation. We could end up taking very serious casualties. We don't know. We can't predict the future. But this is not the environment that General Petraeus found when he got to Mosul.
How applicable do you think it is, General?
Well, I think doctrinally it is very applicable. Now, the story of Mosul changed over time. When I was there, it was after the bombing of the UN headquarters. The insurgency had begun. And there was, in fact, security issues in the area. But frankly, the best way to defeat an insurgency is not to allow it to start. And that was the process that General Petraeus was going through. But Colonel Macgregor's points on the challenges in Baghdad are certainly true. This is going to be much more difficult because the insurgency has begun, the civil war is going on, and it's going to be a terribly difficult task.
He also mentioned that even according to his own doctrine, it would require a lot more forces than he's going to have.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a high-risk operation. There is no doubt about that. And it is problematic whether any person, General Petraeus or anyone, could be successful or would be successful in these circumstances.
Let me ask you both about the political component, because a big part of this will obviously be getting Prime Minister Maliki to commit the forces necessary and so forth. How good is he at that?
Well, first of all, let's be frank. What is the situation that we are in today? We are a political football for the Sunni Muslims and the Shiites. We were welcome as long as we helped to establish a Shiite dictatorship.
But do you think
if we don't do that now, we're going to find ourselves in conflict with the Shiites.
But do you think that he has the skills to do, if it can be done, to be persuasive with the Iraqi leadership to get them to do what needs to be done?
Well, he's very charming, but I don't think that's going to make much difference at this point because there are other more profound interests at stake in that country.
Well, I think Doug brings up the key point. No matter how good he is, and to answer your question, Margaret, he has great political skills. We saw a lot of it today. The fact that he was able to stand back and allow that political dialogue to take place in front of him and not engage in it was a sign of wisdom that will be very useful in Baghdad. And he does know a lot of the players. He said he doesn't know Maliki, but he knows a lot of the soldiers. He comes back with a reputation, I think, mostly positive. One of my Iraqi students at Georgetown today was going through the website for me, looking at what the Sunni groups and the Shia groups were saying about it. And overall, they're very interested and a little bit apprehensive on what he will bring here. But that's not to lessen the challenge. And the United States is in a strategic position that is most difficult, and no one man with a mere 21,000 more soldiers is necessarily going to make the success.
Very quick questions. He was asked repeatedly today, if you think it's not working, if you think you don't have what you need, will you have the courage or will you have the honesty to come and tell us? Do you think he will?
Well, if runs true to course, I think he will probably, once he encounters serious resistance, ask for more troops.
I think he'll speak up. There'll be no doubt about it. He will stay focused on the mission and trying to work the problem, but he'll speak up.
General Nash, Colonel Macgregor, thank you.